We're almost halfway through the month of May, and cruise news continues to roll in. You know, there are so many things going on. Sometimes I rather just wait for the updates that have a more finite decision. Because if we were to do an update every day, it would be changing so frequently, we wouldn't even know which way is up. However, hot off the press, compliments of Travel Weekly, the U.S. Senate passes legislation to enable Alaska cruising this summer. Alaska is opening for cruising this summer. Okay, why am I excited? Because, oh my goodness, there's so many reasons to be excited. You know, I refuse to be selfish, and Alaska has suffered in a way that can only be explained by numbers. There is an act called the PVSA, which basically stands for the Passenger Vessel Services Act. And in essence, this speaks to having to touch a international port of call, transiting to another U.S. port of call. Now, we've been talking about this on and off, and in essence, this PVSA Act, which was enacted in 1886, requires foreign flagged ships, which almost all cruise vessels are, to stop in at least one foreign port when sailing between two U.S. destinations. And that is the reason Alaska cruises stop in either Vancouver or Victoria, British Columbia. That's in Canada. Now, the big deal is that the Alaska Tourism Restoration Act, sponsored by Alaska's Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, have gained success. And what this basically means is the ban by Canada on all cruise calls or embarkations that would touch a Canadian port. And as a matter of fact, this is West Coast that we were looking at for Alaska, but if you should really think about it, it could also apply to East Coast, but not really. Anyway, continuing along, it basically speaks to Canada not permitting any large vessels to traverse and to stop in their ports until February 2022. And what that was meaning for Alaska was that for a second year running, Alaska cruising would be canceled. And for those of us who are excited about cruising Alaska, it's a very short window. Usually starts in May, and by September, worst case scenario, early October, the ships are out of there. So very, very short window. Lots of communities depend on this economic activity, and lots of ships have been pretty much purpose built for Alaska. And so the loss would have been tremendous for all concerned. And so this bill will allow the bypassing of the Canadian ports for vessels sailing between Washington and Alaska. Point that caught my attention, you know, as the senator spoke on the floor May 13th, she said, "This shows that the health and restoration of our economy cannot be held up by Canada, especially since Alaska has led with vaccinations in the country, in USA, and our communities are ready to welcome visitors back." Now, she went on to say that the bill helps safeguard the livelihood of Alaskan-owned small businesses and entire communities. And those are the ones in particular that serve these cruise passengers. So both Sullivan and Murkowski urged the House of Representatives to swiftly pass the bill in order to prevent Alaskan communities from losing out on another tourism season. Alaska USA Congressman Don Young introduced companion legislation in the House. In a statement, of course, Clear congratulated them for all their efforts to save the Alaska cruise season. Clear and its members hope to return this summer and help support Alaskan communities by bringing people back to work. The legislation would terminate the PVSA waiver either when Canada drops its cruise ban or on March 31st, 2022. The PVSA was passed in the 19th century to protect U.S. shipbuilders and operators. Kind of funny that what you pass to protect has now become a deterrent. But then that's over 100 years later, so what can we say? The last large ocean ship built in a U.S. shipyard was in 1958. There is still a small ship U.S. shipbuilding industry, and many U.S. flag small ships operate in the U.S. So that might have been a mouthful, but a very, very important mouthful, because Alaska is a huge frontier that make the landscape of cruising worth doing. So kudos. We lift our hats. I still have Alaska on my bucket list, and this whole pandemic has taught me the value of procrastinating, because had I done Alaska when I had planned to do it, it would now be under my belt and not sitting in my future. But that's how that is. And of course, to wrap up the daily news today, the news out is that as vaccinated Americans get back to travel, get back to life, get back to all that they do, fully vaccinated persons will not need to wear a mask. That discussion continues to unravel itself, and we'll follow it silently until a landmark event causes us to speak further on it. So that's how we see things today on the Daily News.